All right, what's going on, guys? Damon here, and today I want to break down fractional CMO strategy from end to end. Basically, everything I do as a fractional CMO and running a marketing team, what that looks like. Now, this is going to be specifically for companies that sell at higher price points that have a sales team that closes deals over the phone for them for usually price points in the range of anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000. So if you're like an e-commerce brand, you sell something at a lower ticket price point, probably not what you're looking for here. So let me go ahead, share my screen, and walk through this from end to end. So first and foremost, I I'm just going to type this out as I go. I personally believe that any CMO, any head of marketing, whatever it is, basically the person who's in charge of marketing is really responsible for these three main things. If you can nail these three things, you are not only going to run a very successful marketing organization that's super profitable, but on top of that, I think that it's pretty hard for your entire company to not do extremely well if marketing can nail these three things. So, first and foremost, lead volume. I personally see that as I'm not going to give any hard metrics here because this all kind of depends on the individual state of your business. What is quality lead volume for one business at say a $10 million run rate annually is going to be drastically different than someone who has like a $1 billion run rate. So first and foremost, lead volume. I personally define that as our sales team's calendar is fully packed out every single day. Pretty simple. Next, lead quality. So this one is basically, are you getting the right types of people through your funnels into your ecosystem? Are you getting people who are not only the right type of industry? For example, I sell to businesses. If I'm running a funnel and I'm getting people who are not business owners through my funnel, clearly that's poor lead quality. So, are they the right type of industry, niche, whatever it is? Are they financially qualified? And do they have the ideal levels of intent we're looking for? That's how I see lead quality. I'll go into that a little bit further in a second. And then lastly, profitability. I think this is a huge part of your role as a CMO, as a marketing director. If you're not able to maintain a profitable company, you're in charge of a lot of spend on the marketing team. So, that's a big part of your job. So let's dive into each one of these individually. If we're looking at lead volume, I just want to reverse engineer this from end to end so you can kind of see the way that I look at it. So if I'm going to determine lead volume from end to end for a company, I just reverse engineer it from back to front. So let's look at everything we need here. So first and foremost, leads, total number of leads coming in. Second, booked calls. How many of those leads coming through the funnel are actually turning into a booked call with one of your sales reps? Then we have taken calls. So how many of those booked calls are people, actually showing up? Are we actually giving your salespeople an at bat to pitch them on your services, eventually become a customer or client? And lastly, closes. So how many people are actually closing as a client for your business? So let's keep these numbers, let's keep it really simple here. Let's say you're trying to determine the amount of lead volume you want to hit as a business, and your goal from back to front is 100 deals this month. So let's say you're shooting for $1 million in front end cash collection. So $10,000 price point. Okay, so continuing this term. So we want 100 deals closed this month. How many calls do we need in order to hit that? Or how many taken calls do we need to hit? So we're going to reverse this in terms of, what is a sales team close rate? So I do sales team close rate based off of taken calls. So let's say on average across your, let's say 10 closers or 10 AEs, whatever it is, let's say they are averaging a 25% close rate on their calls. So 25% close rate. that means 1 out of every 4 calls closes as a deal. By those metrics, that means we're going to need to take 400. Since 1 in 4 are closing, that means we need to make sure 400 calls are taken this month in order to stay on track with that 100 per month. Now, of course, just because someone books a call doesn't mean they actually show up. I'd say right now in July 2024, pretty much, especially on B2C, I'd say industry norm on show rates is right around 50%. It pains me to say that, of course, and I have a lot of thoughts on this concept, but that is what I am seeing across all of my clients at the moment, and I do a lot of consulting calls outside of my own client work, and I'd say this is pretty normal across the board at this point in time. So 50% show rate on those 400, that means we need to book 800 calls this month. So 800 calls, that translates into 400 taken calls. That translates into 100 deals this month. Okay, so now this is where things, I think that app to booking ratios, whatever you want to call it, that's what I usually refer to it as. These can be pretty, it varies a lot from industry to industry in terms of like the amount of leads into what that translates into actual booked calls. And also there's like various channels to go off of here, but let's say for simplicity that 20% of leads coming in are actually turning into a booked call. So 20% lead to booking ratio. I'd say that's a little bit on the high end of the spectrum, but that's factoring in things like having a good setter team, having email dialed in, having good VSL. So it's 20% lead to booking ratio on 800 booked calls. So basically we're going to multiply that 800 by 5. So that would mean we need 4,000 leads per month. So 4,000 leads, 20% of these leads book as a call. That means 800 booked calls. 50% of these 800 show up. That means we have 400 taken calls, 25% close rate. That results in 100 deals this month. So that's basically how we calculate. That's how I calculate lead volume personally. I think there's various ways to do this. If we want to get a little bit more granular on this, I'm not going to go, crazy deep in the weeds here. But let's say out of these 4,000 leads, we have these coming in from, we have direct bookings, we have setter bookings, and we have email. So we're going to get a certain amount of those from each of these channels. And I'm going to project that out on the marketing team. This is going to determine like how much I need to spend on each channel. For example, let's say, I'm just making the numbers simple here, but let's say we're looking to have, say 500 bookings from setters, 500 bookings from email, and 3,000 bookings from paid ads. The numbers this was how I would also like determine spend. How much do we need to spend on paid ads in order to get 3,000 bookings? So I would reverse engineer that too. But I don't want to totally derail this. That's going to be a video for another time. Okay, next, let's keep it moving here in terms of lead quality. So lead quality, I think that comes down to a couple things. So if I want to make sure my clients are having adequate lead quality, there's a couple things I want to scan for. First and foremost, I want to scan for industry. This would be along the lines of, okay, let's say my client is a marketing agency for roofing businesses. So therefore, in order for someone to be a client for them, they need to run a roofing business, like bare minimum. If the people coming through the funnel are a dentist or a soccer coach or a photographer, they could be like the world's best photographer, the world's highest paid photographer, whatever it is. if they're not a roofing business, they are not a MQL, marketing qualified lead. So they need to hit these metrics in order to be, an MQL in this case. So I like to scan for that. I usually do some sort of financial qualification as well. A pretty simple one for this is just basic revenue. Where's your revenue at? I'll do in whatever calendar booking application you're using, whether that's Calendly, Once Hub, maybe it's Typeform, whatever it is, you can do either just a free form, where's your business revenue at? I personally prefer on the B2C side to do a couple drop downs. So a couple a multiple choice in this case. So say $0 to $2,000 a month, $2,000 a month to $5,000 a month, $5,000 a month to $10,000 a month, and $10,000 a month plus. I find, especially on B2C, a lot of people are a lot more, they don't really like talking about how much money they make. Business owners love to talk about how much money they make and brag about it. B2C people, just basic consumers, a lot of times they do not like to talk about that. So that's kind of my approach there. So we've got our industry qualification, we've got our financial qualification, and you don't always have to do revenue in this case. A common thing that I will do also in terms of a financial qualification, especially on B2B, is like number of employees. So for example, if you're talking to a roofing business and they have 20 employees, they're clearly doing relatively well for themselves. They wouldn't be able to employ that many people if they were, just a horribly run business that makes no revenue on a monthly basis. So I'll use that. Alternatively, another reason for that is because, especially if you are in like the local lead gen game in the case of this example, you want to make sure that you're a good fit for their services in the sense of like, can you actually fulfill on the work? For example, let's say you talk to a solo roofing business owner. I don't know anything about the roofing world, but if this is actually feasible or not. But let's say this roofer is just kind of a one-man shop. They do literally everything. They close the deals. They go and fix the roofs. They do it all. They don't have employees. So if you're like an ads agency and you're going to come in and book a bunch of calls for them on Facebook ads, it's like, how many can they really take on a monthly basis aside from what they're already doing? Can they just take on like 100 new jobs this month? I mean, probably not. You've got to be a total beast of a roofer to do like 100 jobs a month on your own. I don't really think that's possible, just being realistic. So it helps to determine that as well. So this is the main thing, like industry, financials, and then lastly, now this gets a little bit trickier. This is a little bit harder to do, but intent. So a common thing I see on CMO deals that I do, which is a little bit harder to justify, it's a little bit more gray area in this case, is like, what is the intent of the person on the call? For example, sometimes our salespeople will hop on calls with people. The first thing they hear is like, "Oh, who are you again? I forgot why I booked this call." That intent is clearly very low. If you're just running, say, DM ads or something, or you have like a really clickbait VSL, and it's getting people through it and booking, but it's not really triggering them at all. It's not really memorable in any case. That means the intent is low. So if they have very little intent to actually move forward with your services, that's a big part of lead quality. So we want to scan for that in some way. So to give you an example, when I sold loans, I used to be a loan salesperson in New York a couple years back. Usually I'd hop on with a new lead and I'd say something along the lines of, "Hey, this is Damon. Are you interested? Do you have any financing needs?" Just very to the point. Like, that's the reason they filled out the application. If they say no, I'll do a follow-up like, "Okay, so you're not interested in securing an SBA loan or any loan whatsoever." They say no, then I'll follow up with, "Okay, well, do you have any interest in securing like a line of credit?" If they say no to that, then I'll usually end with like, "Okay, well, you just filled out an application for financing. Why did you do that? Why did you fill out this application for financing if you don't need financing? And then if they give an answer that's something along the lines of like, okay, I'm like, I'm a college student and I was looking for a grant, you know, or I'm looking for loan forgiveness, or um, just basically something along the lines of like, there's no way in hell I'm looking for a business loan, which is the thing I was selling at the time. I will screen for this. I'll have my SDRs, my setters, whatever we call them, screen basically just to look for intent from people. And if there's no intent whatsoever, then they're not a qualified lead. It's just kind of hard to close people on something with they have zero intent whatsoever. That's really a function of, I'd say yes, it's partially on the sales team, but a lot of it also comes down to the marketing team in terms of, do you have solid indoctrination processes in place before people are hopping on calls. So this is another common thing. So that's pretty much it for lead quality. I could do, a 3-hour video on this. There's definitely a lot more to it. I actually filmed a whole course on it pretty recently. But I want to shift gears towards profitability. So end of the day, like if you're a CMO, you're head of marketing, and you're hitting good lead volume, you're hitting good lead quality, but you're paying way too much for it, then it makes it really hard for you to run a company. So you have to make sure you're keeping finances in check. You have to make sure you are profitable, because if you're not profitable, then, what are we doing here? So in terms of profitability, I like to focus on 3 main metrics. Number 1, cost per marketing qualified lead. So a lot of businesses focus on, cost per lead. There's basic CPL, but that doesn't really factor in any kind of qualitative metrics in terms of like, is this actually a closable lead? Kind of like the things I was speaking about in the last part there. So if you are a marketing agency for roofers and you're getting a $2 cost per lead, but you're getting a ton of insurance agents coming through your funnel, that's just kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say you're doing your job very well there as a marketer. It's like the salespeople can't really do anything with that. So I like to focus on cost per qualified lead. How are we, or either cost per lead or cost per booked call, kind of, I track both of those in this case, but, end of the day, we're looking to get qualified leads to the funnel. So we start there. Next, front end ROAS, front end return on ad spend. And lastly is cost per acquisition. So I'm going to walk through each of these. So in terms of front end ROAS, that's like, what is our return on ad spend up front? So let's say it's July right now. Let's say my client spends $50,000 on Facebook ads this coming month. And up front, we collect back $100,000. That would mean our front end ROAS is a 2x. We spend $50K, we make $100K. A lot of people do this in terms of like contracted ROAS. Let's say, yes, we're making $100,000 up front, but we have, say, $500,000 in contract. I don't really like to go off of that metric just because the money's not in your account. We can't make marketing decisions based off of money that's not in the account, because then we get into this process of spending money we don't have. And that can be pretty dangerous. We can't really make decisions off of that because you can end up very deep in the red if you go that route. A lot of people don't complete payment plans. A lot of people renege on contracts. So you can't really go that route. I don't like to do that. So I like to focus on front end ROAS because that's money that we know we have in the account. So after cost per qualified lead, front end ROAS, lastly, cost per acquisition. So how much are we paying to acquire a new customer or new client? This is pretty simple. Like if we pay, if we have a $10,000 price point and we're paying, say, $1,500 to acquire a new client, that's solid, assuming we're collecting the full $10,000. If we're paying $1,500 and we're collecting, say, $500, that means we're pretty deep in the red. So as a marketer, we're always trying, as a CMO marketing director, we're always trying to keep our cost per acquisition as low as possible because, the cheaper we can acquire new clients for, the more we can scale spend. If it's profitable or if it's really profitable in this case, obviously there's a lot of other factors that go into play. Like you have to take 15% off the top, 10 to 15% off the top to pay the sales rep. There's taxes, things of that sort. There's other overhead fees. We have to factor those things in. But as long as we have good margin there, we can scale that. So that's really the main things in terms of profitability. If we are able to nail these three things, lead volume, lead quality, do it in a way that's profitable, then chances are you're going to be running a pretty successful business. So hopefully this is helpful. This is pretty surface level stuff. If you have any questions, any thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments.